Good morning. It's really nice to see all of you. I hope you've enjoyed the service so far. I know I have. I love all the music and the dancing. Maybe if we can get more consistent music and dancing, we don't have to have sermons all the time. I wouldn't mind that. I love the celebration feeling. I hope we can do that more and more over time. So today, I am giving the message on how to give without regret. This message has kind of very near and dear to my heart over the years. It's kind of been something that comes up over and over again. As the years have gone, and I'm a relatively young person, but I've worked with many people, and I've counseled many people, and I've listened to many people's stories, and I've watched many of my brothers and sisters go through different things in their life and in the church. And I think that one of the most challenging situations that I see or deal with is these situations where, a person at a certain point in their life is really giving of themselves, whether it's to their company or their work, or whether it's to the church, or whether it's to the people in their family that they love, their spouse, their kids. And then at some point along that journey, the person becomes very bitter and resentful and kind of looks at that experience like, why did I do that? What a waste of time. I wish I had never given myself in that way. So I've seen this kind of dynamic happen many times, whether it's in a marriage, whether it's as a pastor. I have many friends who are pastors, and I have many people that I know who have tried to invest in a position like a pastor, youth ministry, church leadership of some kind. And it's unfortunate, but in our unificationist community, we have a bit of a reputation where young people in their 20s, 30s, or whatever, who try to take leadership positions don't last more than 2 or 3 years. And I know that when we first came here 6 years ago, many of you probably thought, oh, these guys aren't going to last more than a couple of years. Not because you were, sure or whatever, but, that's just been the tendency. That's been what's happened, unfortunately. So having witnessed this many times in my life, I think that there's a part of me that wonders, am I going to end up, am I going to give and give and give and end up kind of regretful after a certain number of years, like so many other people I know? And also, it's been a personal struggle of mine over the years, especially when we first came here, to expect other people to give. So when we first came, my mindset was like, okay, I'm going to give 100%, but I'm not going to expect anyone else to do anything. So if they want to do something, that's fine. But I've seen so many people give and give and give and resent having given. I don't want to see that happen in our community. I don't want to see that happen under my watch. So you can see there's already a bit of a dichotomy there. I'll give, but I don't want other people to give. As you can imagine, it doesn't really work. People would even come to us at a certain point and say, hey, you can ask me to do more. I want to do more. I'd like to do more if you ask. I'd be like, oh, why are you putting me in this position? Why don't you just do it without me asking? Then I don't have to feel responsible. And then of course, giving is such a fundamental theme. Like they were talking about living for others. It's my blessing. In this song was perfect. Thank you very much. Didn't even need an offering song, but in the Bible, I think this is in Proverbs, says, give freely and become more wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. This is the verse that's on some of the offering envelopes in your seats, some of them. People curse those who hoard their grain, but they bless the one who sells in time of need. If you search for good, you will find favor, but if you search for evil, it will find you. But the godly flourish like leaves in spring. Proverbs 11:24. So we have this interesting dynamic where we know that giving is important, and we know that when we give, we receive. But the reality is that when in this world, when we give, we don't always receive. Or we don't always receive in the way that we would like to, or we feel is owed to us. But fundamentally, when we give, we expect to receive something, usually. That's why they call it give and take. In a perfect world, hypothetically, in a perfect world, when we give of ourselves, we receive proportionally, or maybe even more than what we gave. When we give to our friends, when we give to our loved ones, when we give to our coworkers, when we give to our company, when we give to the church, there's a equal benefit. There's a response. There's an appreciation. Thank you. What can I do for you? If a mistake is made, or if you feel like you were wronged in some way, then that person or that institution or whatever will come to you and be like, how can I make it right? What can I do to make it up to you? What can I do to heal this wound or this scar? Actually, in many times in the last 6 years, as we've met with families and individuals, we have often played this role where people share with us the different situations that they've been through and the experiences they've had. And me and Adonia, on behalf of the church, as representatives of the church, we've apologized to people. We say, I'm sorry, we can't fix that thing that happened, but we're really sorry that this happened to you, and we really hope to make it up to you in some way. In a perfect world, all our relationships are like that. But we don't live in a perfect world, and we aren't perfect people. So it's hard to actually be very truly altruistic. It's hard to be truly giving when we're caring for others, when we're investing into others, in a way that we don't actually seek for anything in return. So we often expect something in return, even if we don't receive it. Because the reality is, people don't always return your love. People don't always return your favors. When we give of ourselves, people sometimes don't even notice. Sometimes people don't even care. Sometimes people will return love with hardness or with their own baggage. So what do we do in that kind of situation? Because naturally, I think that if we're in a situation where we do that enough, then we end up regretting it. So the first thing we need to look at in this kind of a situation is God. We can be very grateful and relieved that God is a God of unconditional love. If God was not a God of unconditional love, then there would not be hope to see unconditional love in this world. But because God is a God who loves us without reservation and without expectation, we get glimpses of that through our own experience as parents, as whenever we're in a situation where we take care of someone from a heart of a parent, even if it's a sibling, an employee, somebody that we really care about, we experience that aspect of God that is unconditional. I don't care if you ever appreciate me. I don't care if you ever return my love. I just want to give it. This is God's love. Here's something that our founder, Reverend Moon, said. He said, since the beginning of human history, God has lived more for the sake of others and invested himself more than any being. God has continuously invested without expecting a direct return, and God will continue to do so for eternity. God is the king and ancestor of all those who live for the sake of others. To be treated well, you must first treat others well. You reap as you sow. Sow evil to reap evil. Sow goodness to reap goodness. Your concern should be how to give and how to give well. As for the return to you, you must trust in God. He will take care of it. This becomes I think, apparent to most of us in our relationships with the people who are closest to us in our lives. Many times we start off with a desire to give and just love unconditionally. Oh, Adonia, you need, anything you need, a back rub, do the dishes, do the laundry, play with the kids, take all the time you need. But because we're not perfect people, many times some misunderstanding will happen, some difficulty will happen. I feel unappreciated. I don't want to give anymore. I gave this, I gave that, I gave this, I gave that. And pretty soon you're counting all the things you gave, and you're like, wait a second. What started off as being unconditional and without expecting anything in return, all of a sudden becomes a balancing act. Well, I don't know if I want to give more until I've received what's owed to me. Giving unconditionally becomes, you owe me. I don't want to give anymore because you owe me. And this could be in the relationship with your spouse. This could be in your relationship with your kids. It could be a friend. It could even be the church. It could be anything, because all things are relationship. All things are relationships. But God's nature and God's character isn't like that. This is one way in which we can know we're far away from God. We don't understand God. But it gives us a hint about how we can become more like God, how we can become more Christ-like in our own life. God's nature is that he gives, we have a special word for this, it's called shimjang. It's a Korean word, and it literally translates as heart, but what it really means is the irrepressible desire to want to give to something. It means God can't help himself. It's just a part of who he is. It's not something that God has to will himself to do. It's just who he is. It's very hard for us to live that way. And the reality is, many times when we invest ourselves into others or invest ourselves into something, a cause that we really believe in, we can come to regret it at some point in our life, because we don't feel like our effort was really recognized or returned in the way that we wish it was. So I'd like to read some more words from our founder, Reverend Moon. This is a little bit long, but please just follow along, and I hope that there's something in here that resonates and speaks to you this morning on this topic. He said, "Let us take an illustration of a good man and a bad man. Let us say there is one man who has 10 friends. Day in and day out, this man is unselfishly serving his 10 friends. People cannot help but love this man. He can become the very best friend to 10 people. Then his influence will spread to the relatives and friends of those first 10 people. By giving and serving unselfishly, this man becomes prosperous. He is a center of harmony and unity because he lives God's principle. Unselfishness brings prosperity. Here is a good man. But suppose, on the contrary, this man said to his friends, 'You 10, bring everything to me. You are here to serve me.' If he spoke this way to his friends 3 times, everyone would end all connection with him. They would want to have nothing at all to do with him. So he would be left all alone. Isn't that true even in our society? It is universally true. A self-centered doctrine, a self-centered philosophy, a self-centered way of life will fling you head over heels down the tragic road of self-destruction. However, if you live your life in service to others, you will find prosperity. It may seem that such a route would lead you to ruin, but it will not. The only reason it may not always bring prosperity to you is because you do not give to the very end. In the middle, you suddenly become skeptical. You change your heart or pity yourself, and so you shrink from God's law of total giving. A good result never materializes. Total giving is the way of prosperity because it is the way of God. We must all work for the ideal way of life. I exist for my family. My family exists for our society. Our society exists for our nation. Our nation exists for the world exists for God, and God exists for you and me, for all humankind. In this great circle of give and take, there is harmony, there is unity, and there is an eternal process of increasing prosperity. Furthermore, since in this circuit all existence will fulfill its purpose of creation, there is abundant and profound joy. This is the kingdom of heaven, in which feelings of happiness overflow. In this world, selfishness ruins everything. Selfishness in the family causes disharmony, which then erupts into bitterness and strife. Everyone wants to be served instead of serving others. Wives tell their husbands what to do and then seek to be served. Husbands want to be served by their wives. Parents expect service from their children, and the children take their parents for granted. This is demonstrated in our families, in our societies, and in our nations. So a big part of living life and growing to model God's love and character in our lives is learning how to kind of root out the selfishness that's in our hearts, that's in our souls. Many times when we invest ourselves into something, over the process of time, we fill ourselves up with things that we don't really want, that we didn't really intend. Frustration, resentment, anger, impatience, that I am not receiving what's owed to me or my dues or what I expect to receive for the effort that I put in. It's a different kind of full. Sometimes we talk about feeling full and like, oh, I'm so full of love and, appreciation and gratitude. It's like the opposite. It's like we can't feel any love or appreciation or express any love or appreciation when we're full of those other things. And so we need to empty ourselves. This is something that Reverend Moon talks about. He calls it going to the 0 point. We have to come to a place where we take all that stuff in ourselves, that the pressure, the anger, whatever it is, sometimes stuff that we don't even admit to ourselves that we have. And we have to pour it out. We have to empty ourselves. This is a short excerpt that talks about that. He says, furthermore, we totally forget about the investment we make and invest all over again. We continue this process until we reach the 0 point, having no concept of self. Since God poured out all his faith, what is left is 0. Since God poured out all his love, what is left is 0. Since God poured out all his obedience, what is left is 0. Nevertheless, heaven's true love is such that the more it is invested, the more it grows. We must come to resemble God in this way. What is left is 0. A couple days ago, a young man, I say young man, he's probably my age, came to the church. And this is one of the things about being a pastor and living next to the church, is that people come knocking on your door sometimes. Usually people are asking for money, so I was a little bit hesitant to talk to him. But, opened the door, I was like, hey, how can I help you? And he's like, I just need someone to talk to. So we sat down for a little bit, and he was sharing with me, he's got 5 kids, and this last couple years has just been so difficult. And his wife is called the social services and told them that he threatened his kids with a gun, even though he says he didn't. And he had tears in his eyes as he was sharing with me that his 5 kids are getting taken away. And he said, I've tried to be a good dad all my life. When I had kids, I gave up drugs, I gave up drinking. I had a tough life growing up, but I didn't want my kids to have the experience that I had growing up. So I was like, wow, this seems to be a really good guy. I don't know that many people who can say that. And I couldn't do anything for him, as you can imagine. Like, I can't intercede on his behalf to social services. I couldn't, change anything about what was happening in his life. But he poured himself out to me for one reason or another. I feel awkward when people pour themselves out to me because I don't feel like anybody. I'm like, who am I, But I can listen to somebody, I can, if I can be a person that they can pour themselves out to, then that's great. And so I prayed for him, we prayed together, and he told me that in his life, he's always put him and his family first. He's worked, he's taken care of his family, and he's never really tried to reach out to anyone outside of his own family. And I admired him for taking care of his family, but then when difficult times came, he had nobody to go to. And so he's like, yeah, I know that was probably not the smartest thing to do, but now I really see the value of that. So I actually kind of half expected maybe to see him here today, but since he's not here, I'm sharing the story. But one thing he did say was that it really helps me so much just to be able to share these things with somebody, because he didn't feel like he had anyone who cared about him enough, or was in that kind of position in his life that could listen to him without judgment, without making assumptions or offering argument or something like that. And so many times I've had the experience personally too, that to empty myself out is so important to be able to move forward in life. We think that we can just stuff all the things that we are experiencing in our life, but after a while we just become burdened. We become too full. And there comes a point where we need to empty ourselves. We need to go back to zero. And whether that's with a parental figure in your life, a religious figure in your life, or just somebody that you feel really cares about you, that's a really important step. Otherwise, we just carry those things with us, and then we don't know how to handle it, and it ends badly. How many people do I know that walk away from a relationship, walk away from a position, wishing that they had just never done it in the first place? They felt they were worse off. They would have been better off if they had just never done it in the first place. And that is really unfortunate. Really unfortunate. I don't ever want to end up in that kind of situation, and I don't wish that on anybody. So it's like I said, it's a very near and dear to me. And I think that we all need to kind of support each other to help us not get to the point where we are too full. And also, just as another aside, sometimes in order to be able to give effectively, in order to be able to give in a way that people can receive, we have to empty ourselves of our frustrations, our resentments. I know people who try to give and love and invest, but they're holding on to a lot of stuff. And people can feel that. It doesn't quite work. So it can actually be hurtful to others when we give from that kind of a position. So I want to come to a close with one last verse from the Bible, from Psalm 51. Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and grant me a willing spirit to sustain me. Please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, good morning. We greet you together as a community. So grateful to be with all brothers and sisters here and everyone who couldn't make it. God, you know that as we go through life, we try to be like you. We try to do our best. We try to give love to others despite our own shortcomings, of which we have many. And we know that many times along the way, despite our best intentions, we become burdened. We become heavy with our expectations and with our selfishness, our wanting a return on the investment that we gave, Heavenly Parent. And even though we know your way is to give unconditionally, like your Son did for us, we hit our limits, and we find that we can't give more than a certain amount at times, even if we want to. I pray, Heavenly Parent, that if we are feeling that way today or at some point in our lives, that we can offer all our grievances to you. We can empty ourselves, Heavenly Parent, to be able to come back to that original place of wanting to give without reservation, of wanting to give without expectation of return, the way you give, the way you love. As we're all seeking to try to be like you, we're all seeking to follow your way, and we all want to follow. I just pray, Heavenly Parent, that you can be a part of our lives so intimately, and please help us to let go of our things that we're holding on to. Please help us to empty ourselves. Please help us to go back to zero so that we can love again, so that we can give again, that we can become closer to you. We can become like you, especially to the people in our lives that truly deserve it and that truly need it. I thank you for this message, for each and every single one of us that could receive something from it. And I thank you so much for your amazing presence in our lives. We are so indebted. And I offer this prayer in all of our names as Blessed Central Families. Amen and adieu. Thank you.